And here we are. It is a special Sunday episode of No Butts About It. I'm here, Josh Butts. My co-host, Chus, is here in his basement in Pittsburgh. And as you can see, he's below me. I don't know where he's appearing on your screen, but Joe Comeau from the Cardinal Rule is here, and he's joining us to talk about the exciting hiring of your new head coach. That is not the Bengals defensive coordinator. It is the Eagles defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. So I don't know much about him, admittedly. I assume you've done your research. In fact, I know you've done your research because you've been posting about him all over Twitter. So what are you looking for in him, and can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, so, he's a younger coach. He was defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. When he first took over, I think he brought them to having about the 10th ranked defense, somewhere in that area. But last year they were the second overall defense. He did a really good job. But, the Super Bowl, the way it ended, a lot of people made him the scapegoat. I don't think there's any shame in losing to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. That's going to happen. But, actually, it's interesting. A lot of Philadelphia fans are like, good riddance, and Cardinals fans are like, we'll take him. But he comes in as a defensive coach, and, as I'm sure the trend for a while has been offensive-oriented head coaches. There's been some questions about that. There are some defensive coaches that have been, successful. Mike Tomlin, Sean McDermott, Bill Belichick, although he does a little bit of everything at this point in his career. So he comes in as kind of, this hotshot defensive coordinator, young guy, spent time with the Vikings organization and the Colts. I actually spent 3 years as a scout with the Rams, which I really like. That means he has an eye for evaluating players and understands that. And I think that's a big plus. But a lot of people are looking at the performance in the Super Bowl. And my perspective in general with head coaches, when you're looking at the offensive versus defense, if you're getting an offensive coach and you're bringing them in, the most important thing is their offensive scheme that they run and how they coach that up. And you're bringing that guy in so that you've got that offense forever. You don't have to worry about people hiring away, the architect of your offense. Whereas if you're a defensive coach, when you get a good offensive coordinator, he goes and gets a job as head coach, and you have to start over again with, your quarterback's coach, and then he gets hired away. So I think that the scheme is really important with your hiring an offensive coach, but with a defensive coach, being the best defensive coach isn't enough. Like, you look at Vic Fangio, very respected defensive coach, and, just didn't work out as a head coach in Denver. So in my opinion, this is just my take, is when you're hiring a head coach who was a defensive coach, you're going more for the CEO, leader of men kind of thing, right? Which, look at Mike Tomlin, your coach, in your division, who I respect, has never had a losing season. And you look at his quarterback situation this year. But, I don't know if there's a better leader in the NFL than Mike Tomlin. And I mean, it's just that intangible thing. And that's why, for me, DeMeco Ryans was my top pick. Obviously, he went to Houston, didn't even interview with the Cardinals because of that quality. So I didn't know a lot about Gannon in terms of that regard. And through his press conference, and the interviews and the things I've seen about him and heard about him, it really does seem that they identified him for that reason. And I've seen those things so far, at least I would say hopeful indicators that he really is that dude in terms of the leadership, that CEO type. So I think people who are kind of circling the drain about, look at, he couldn't make adjustments in the Super Bowl are missing the point. What he seems to be is a guy who comes in with the right philosophy for building a team, is going to bring in smart people and get the right people in the right positions and be that kind of leader. And if he can pull that off, I'm really excited about the potential. And the things I've heard so far, I really like. And I could go on forever on that, so maybe we'll break this up and I'll get to that. But there's some things I like about his general defensive philosophy. And there's some things I like about some of the things he said about the way he's going to build around Kyle. There's some particular things about that. And then, he's brought in, his offensive defensive coordinators already so far. And I like what I see in terms of, or things I see about them. So, now that I've gotten a chance to learn more about Jonathan Gannon, I'm really excited about the hire. that I think he's going to bring the right culture, the right kind of organizational leadership. And I think that 2023 is going to be a reset year, but I think if they hit free agency and the draft right, they can be competitive in 2024 when Kyler's healthy again.
Okay. So something I've kind of been harping on is Kyler Murray. I am not a huge Kyler Murray guy. Chus is smiling because he knows this.
Yeah.
I don't think he's necessarily the most mature player in the NFL. I wasn't super impressed when he held that press conference, not wanting the, I guess, video game clause, as it kind of came to be known. And then there was obviously him and Cliff Kingsbury didn't always see eye to eye, which you're going to have occasionally, but it seemed they had that more often than a lot of coaches and quarterbacks did. Bringing in a defensive guy, a guy who hasn't necessarily worked with quarterbacks a lot, do you think that will be a problem with Kyler Murray and Jonathan Gannon? Do you think they'll be able to work that out? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not worried at all. And I'm a Kyler apologist. I think he is being. I think that the criticisms are exaggerated and unfair. I think he is sort of an aloof kind of person, a little bit quiet. He's of his generation, but I don't think he's immature like people say he is, I don't think he's a bad dude. I mean, listen, I know you're a fan of this guy, so I'm not trying to take pot shots, but like one Aaron Rodgers is prickly and mercurial but Tom Brady wasn't always the easiest, on his teammates to work with.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers throws his receivers under the bus, in the media. I'm a university professor, so I work with kids his age all the time. So maybe that's part of the reason I'm just not put off by it, because I'm like, he doesn't seem unlike most 20-something-year-olds I'm around every day. And I think it's just, listen, I'm older. I'm in the late 40s, so it might be surprising that I'm the person who's given, hey man, leave the kid alone. But I just feel like it's a generational thing with a lot of people, that there's a different generation of athlete. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I was talking to my friend Kyler Bird, and I was like, man, every generation's, thought the next one was going to hell in a handbasket since Socrates or Plato. And he's like, yeah, I think he probably thought Aristotle was an arrogant little prick. It's just like every generation thinks this of the next generation. Listen, does he have room to mature? Absolutely. Larry Fitzgerald, the poster child and epitome of class act, was kind of immature when he came in the league. He's talked about it. He's not. I just don't think it's really going to be an issue. He wants to win. He's driven. Maybe there's some things he needs to grow with. Listen, you weren't impressed by that press conference. I really liked what he said, because I thought the thing that stood out to me and you're talking about the press conference after the independent study clause was removed, and he came out and said, listen, I'm humble that you all think I'm that talented that I can perform without working hard. But more or less what he said is, to me, that's insulting to the people I play against. He was giving credit to the players, saying, for you to think I can just not work hard and not study film and come out here and perform at a high level, to me, is not respectful of the players I play against. To me, that was a mature thing. Maybe people didn't catch that. But all that aside, right? Yeah, sure, he's got some room to grow. Everyone does, right? But in terms of your question about the defensive-minded coach, there was something that Jonathan Gannon said in one of his press conferences about Kyler that really I loved to see. He said, I'm going to build an offense around Kyler that uses his skill set. Kyler Murray is a problem for defenses. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an offense that uses his skill set to create problems for the defense, and I'm going to prepare him for how defenses are going to attack him. So, there's something about that makes me think maybe Gannon might be just the right guy, because he's a creative defensive coordinator who didn't run a defensive scheme. He ran a multiple front sort of defense that used his talent and adjusted to his talent and to the team he was playing against. That's the thing he talked about in his press conference. He said, I don't run a scheme. I look at the players I have, what they can do, and then I look at the matchups I'm going against, and I put a defense that's right for that, right? And multiple fronts, adjust as needed. So I think that adaptability, which is, again, a word he used in his press conferences, I think that might make him just the right guy. He's going to build an offense instead of coming in with a system like Cliff Kingsbury did and fit Kyler in your system. He's going to find an offensive coordinator who he's hired, Drew Petzing from the Browns, the quarterback's coach there. He's going to have him work with him to build an offense that works with Kyler and his skill set. And instead of trying to fit Kyler into a system, he's going to construct a system that uses Kyler's strengths and then teach him how, hey, I'm a defensive coach. This is what I'm going to do to you when you're running this offense, and this is how you're going to counter it. So for me, kind of excited about that.
That's a really good perspective. I like that. I hadn't heard that yet. That is a good point, though, that he is going to be able to know how they're going to attack Kyler Murray. And I do want to clarify, I don't think Kyler Murray's a terrible person or anything.
Sure.
I'm not
spread it out there. Josh Butts says Kyler Murray is the worst human since. Yeah, no, I get
no,
you. I get you.
No,
there's nuance here, right?
Yeah, I just think there's a sort of you want your quarterback to be likable because then the free agents want to come play for that guy. In my opinion.
Yeah, so. But I say this is media and fan narratives, right? I mean, Patrick Peterson's been chirping against the Cardinals since forever, so I take that with a grain of salt. I think Patrick Peterson has a legitimate gripe against Steve Keim, and that's who he's always kind of said was his main issue. But I don't know, man. There's like players who play with Kyler, like, dude, he's no problems right now. So I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
So I actually did want to ask something, just kind of like going off like the coaching and whatnot. Like when it comes to free agency, because I know obviously like on your own show, you talk about mock drafts and stuff, and we can always discuss that briefly on this show as well as talk about that for in the future and whatnot. But I kind of want to know, we're kind of, I know you touched base briefly on free agency. Do you think, like in your opinion, as of right now, obviously there's still time to maybe make signings and whatnot. Do you think that there is like a specific player that he should go after to benefit Kyler Murray's offense more or less? Just like kind of, is there anybody that you saw that you think would be a pretty good fit per se for his offense?
So I think what Kyler Murray needs on the offensive side of the ball is an offensive line that isn't decimated. That to me is number one thing. And then they need to bring in a running back to add 1 to 2 running backs. I like James Conner. I think he's great in short yardage. He's a better ball catching of the ball than people think. But they need a speed back and a change of pace back. And they need a rotation of backs in case he gets injured. So they need to add a running back. You can do that in the draft, right? 1 to 2 running backs potentially. And they need to fix the offensive line. In terms of like pass catching weapons – if they trade Hopkins, which is rumored that might happen, like, DeAndre Hopkins met with our new general manager, Monty Austin-Ford, a week or two ago, and they discussed his future, and no one knows except for Hopkins and the people in the front office what those discussions led to.
Straight to the Bengals.
No.
Right.
You guys do not
because
need
they need more receivers. Because that's what they need is more receivers, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a Madden franchise at that point.
Right.
You were talking about Madden earlier before,
Right. But like, so if they trade Hopkins, I think they probably need one more pass catcher. But if they keep him right now, at least, I don't think they do. Here's what you need. You need a good defense so that Kyler's not having to play from behind and play hero ball all the time. Right, so oddly enough, paradoxically enough, fixing the defense is one of the things he needs. And you need a good offensive line and add a running back literally on day 3 of the draft. If you do those 3 things, Kyler Murray with a good offensive line, with a defense that doesn't require him to play catch-up all the time, can work with Zach Ertz, Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, and either Hopkins or some other receiver that you bring in. Yes, eventually you'd like to improve that receiving core, but you have to take these kinds of things in stages. You only have so many draft picks, only so much you can do in 1 year in free agency. So in my opinion, pass catchers is one of the lower priorities right now. It's that offensive line. If you can fix that, get a running game, good defense, Kyler can make it work with the guys that he has right now.
I'm surprised you say that since AJ Green just retired. And D-Hop might
because he brought so much for the team last year.
Well,
I love Green. He was a professional, but he didn't do much this last year. The year before, he was pretty good.
Yeah, Still, he's a weapon, though, and he's a guy defenses have to worry about. And I kind of feel the same way about J.J. Watt, because J.J. Watt obviously wasn't in his prime when he was with the Cardinals, but at the same time, he's J.J. Watt. So you've got a double team to block him because he will decimate you. And I'd imagine if I'm Jonathan Gannon, I'd be like, can you come back for one more year, please, JJ? Like, that's a guy I'm sure every defensive-minded coach has wanted to coach for years, and few have gotten the opportunity.
You know, I know in Bengals land you're used to having 3 all-pro wide receivers, but most teams in the NFL, if you stack their pass catchers against Zach Ertz, Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown, who is better than people think, Greg Dortch, you might not know who he is, but that dude, when he gets a chance to play, is good. Rondale Moore and Hopkins, if they keep him, that's better than most pass-catching units in the NFL. If you take away Hollywood Brown, Ertz, McBride, if you take away Hopkins, Ertz, McBride, Hollywood Brown, Dortch, Rondale Moore, and let's say some other journeyman veteran or rookie is kind of middle of the pack-ish, low end of the middle of the pack. But if you're building around a good defense, have a good running game, and have Kyler Murray as a weapon, like you can make look at throughout most of his career, Russell Wilson's pass catchers, right, were not all that. So I would love to have better weapons, but for me, you got to do these things in stages. And priority one is that offensive line. Got to fix the offensive line. It was horrible. If you fix that, you can work with those pass catchers and a running game and defense, and then eventually get the playmakers. But right now with the way that offensive line was, you bring in pass catchers, and he's not going to have time to get it to him.
So let's say hypothetically DeAndre Hopkins gets traded. What do you want for him?
Well, I'll take the next 4 first-round picks for the team, and then their best 3 players. How about that? I mean, give me an open-ended question like that. I'm going to take. But let me answer a different question: is what do I think is realistic and that I'm willing to accept and not walk away? Right. I did a video on this looking at his trade value, and I looked at the trades of other receivers in the last 10 years or so. And, I took into account age because that matters in this, even though, Hopkins is one of the best receivers in the league, but he's going to be, he's in his 30s. And the closest comp was Devontae Adams. And Devontae Adams was still at the time of the trade, and you have to look at the time of the trade, right? Because even though they're about the same age now, time of the trade, he was about a year and a half, I think, younger than Hopkins will be at the time of a hypothetical trade. So, that was a first-round pick and change, right? And I don't have it in front of me. So a late first-round pick. So in a vacuum, I think Hopkins' value is like a late first-round pick or maybe early second. But the free agent class in receivers is not good this year, and the draft class isn't as good as it has been. So there is a scarcity factor in here that Hopkins' value might be higher than people think. I'm leaving that as a possibility because if you're a team out there, a contending team, you're like, we want to trade for a receiver or we want to acquire a receiver and add. You look at the free agency market, it's like, you look at the draft class, You're like, okay, Hopkins might be worth a first and a fourth or a third or something. So listen, if you ask me like objectively in a vacuum, I think it's a early second, late first is probably his value. But it wouldn't shock me if he went for a first and change because of the scarcity of the position right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm just kind of going off on that. When I was looking at kind of like mock drafts and whatnot, just briefly not too long ago, I know that Jordan Addison is like pretty high up there.
I like him, yeah.
Yeah, and I also really like Jordan Addison, and I know that the thing with him is like I feel like a lot of other teams really want him too, and like I think he's like one of the top wide receivers coming out. So if it's only like him and like maybe 2 other really top wide receivers, and there are a lot of teams that could use a wide receiver. So I definitely agree with the Hopkins thing because it was a very similar conversation with a couple years ago. I think actually probably last year with quarterback situation. Like Kenny Pickett was was the top quarterback out of the last year's draft, and like I mean nothing against Kenny, but like obviously like in years past there had been like quarterbacks that had gone like first, 10 or whatever. And it's like, you're like Joe Burrow, and then you have like, Lamar Jackson and like Patrick Mahomes. Some of these players are going like a lot higher up than Kenny Pickett. And then there wasn't another quarterback drafted until like later on. So it was definitely, it definitely was kind of similar to last year, because obviously we had that big Russell Wilson trade and a lot of these other crazy trades last year. So it's a good thing to keep an eye on for everybody listening out there. It's definitely might be something interesting to watch come trade time.
Well, if you look at the draft last year, I don't know if that was a one-year blip or if that was a trend, and I'd be interested to see. But like receivers, I mean, they've always been important, but their value seems to be going up because – like, I remember going through mock draft season. I do a mock draft Monday live stream on my YouTube channel. So we're doing mock drafts every week and just learning about the prospects and running different scenarios. And I remember, like, there was a point where, like, Jahan Dotson, right, was a receiver, was looking like a second-round pick in mock drafts. And then there were word from some of the folks that cover the Cardinals in Arizona, like John Gambador, a guy that everyone in Arizona kind of knows. He's a local sports radio guy there. There was a report from him that's like, hey, the Cardinals really like Jahan Dotson. Don't be surprised if they take him at 23, I think is where they were slated to pick. And my first initial thought was, oh, man, that guy's like a early second rounder. I would rather take, this guy or that guy. And I'm like, all right, but, okay, I guess that's who the Cardinals like. So I started mocking him there in drafts. And then, like, come draft time, Washington takes him at, 17 or something, 16?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's like – and then you start seeing these receivers go off the board. It's like, oh my God. And then you see that both of the Browns get traded, right? AJ and Hollywood. And you just see that guys you thought were going to be second round receivers are going in the mid to late first round. Guys that you thought would be late first rounders were going early first round. So is that a blip or is that the trend? Because if it is, this receiver draft class that isn't as deep as last year's was, you're going to see those guys, like Addison gone really early, and then maybe teams might be coming after, DeAndre Hopkins and offering that mid to late first round pick that they were hoping to get, one of those receivers, but they were long gone. So, yeah, you mentioned last year with the quarterback and with the receiver, there's a trend there that we have to watch and see if it continues this year too.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, the drafts are always interesting every single year, but like I noticed in years past, it always seemed like there was just always like an abundance. But like over the last couple of years, it almost seemed like in certain positions there was less of an abundance, more or less, or like not as high-profiled players as in years past, more or less. So,
what if the Bears come to the Cardinals and they say, we'll give you the first rounder plus, I don't know, something else for DeAndre Hopkins, but maybe a pick next year or a player, probably not a super high-end player, for that number one overall pick.
Wait. So if the Bears offer the
I said that really weird. If the Bears...
wait, you want to give me one overall for Hopkins? Deal. I mean...
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like if anybody...
Just for one overall? You wouldn't want more?
Oh, yeah. No,
I would think you would want more.
No, like that number, like if you look at trade value charts that that have the points assessed to them, like that number one overall pick, its value is so crazy outsized compared to any other first round. Like it drops from like 3,000 points very quickly down to like 1,500 points. It's worth so much. I mean, obviously if you're the Bears, there's no way you would do that. You would trade it for multiple first round picks. But if they want to offer that, I would trade it away, get that, and then I'm trading it to whoever wants a quarterback and getting a king's ransom. So,
right.
But absolutely, you would do that. That's yeah. In fact, when I did the video on Hopkins trade value, I didn't put this in my video, but I in a spreadsheet kind of calculated the point value of the trades for guys like AJ Brown and Hollywood Brown, and only one receiver that was traded had a total point value that exceeded the number one overall pick, and it was Tyreek Hill, and his was a combination of multiple seconds, and it just added up to that. But every other receiver that was traded, when you add up the point value of the total trade package, it was like a mid to late first round pick at most. So that first overall would be very much like one heck of an offer for any receiver in terms of the value.
I mean, I'm just thinking of teams that need wide receivers, and the Bears are definitely up there as probably the most wide receiver needy team that I can think of.
Yeah, I think with the Bears, so many people have kind of mocked that, and or suggested that as a destination. If Hopkins wants to go to a contender, I know that they, a lot of people like Fields, but I don't know the Bears are that much closer to being ready to contend than the Cardinals are.
That's another good point.
So, but if you did that, you're looking at their second round pick and change is what they'd be offering. There's just, I think, GMs are realistic, and Monty Austin-Fort knows that if he calls asking for the 1 overall, the Bears are going, oh, so you're doing a trade swap. You're giving us 3 and taking 1 and Hopkins, right? Because he'd be laughed if it was a straight up, and any GM would. It's not a realistic request. I think people have talked about more realistic options. I think people have talked about the Patriots. There's a lot of respect between Hopkins and Belichick, and so that could be one, though. People say, well, their quarterback situation is up in the air, so why would he go there? I still think with Belichick, you just trust that him and an average quarterback, he'll find a way. But some people have talked about the Chiefs as a possibility.
No.
But that would be very
you want a
dangerous.
Chance next year, don't you?
Dangerous.
I want the Bengals. I want the Bengals to win a Super Bowl eventually.
Yeah, right.
I do not need D-Hop on the Chiefs after Mahomes made Juju look great.
Right. The Chargers are another team people have talked about. There were reports of them. The Jaguars. Go with his former teammate, Christian Kirk. So, those are some of the teams. I think, after coming out of the meeting, it seemed like Hopkins was happy with the meeting. Just in social media posts, how much you can read of that, I don't know. But he hasn't been coming out, making any negative posts or anything. And I think if there was an agreement that they were going to trade him, I think they probably talked about where, and he felt good, like the Cardinals were going to do him right. Or maybe what came out of the meeting is he's like, nah, I'm here for this, right? We're going to bring in a coach, and I'm here for this. And, my position on whether the Cardinals should or shouldn't trade him is pretty simple. If Hopkins in that meeting was like, no, I want to be here, then you keep him. If he was in that meeting saying, yeah, I want to move on, you trade him. You don't want a guy around who doesn't want to be there. So you go with what he wants. That's my position on that.
That's a fair position, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, there are so many options for Hopkins potentially, because even obviously the teams that really need him, but there's always that team that may not necessarily need him. They might have some solid wide receivers, but might just want to add that extra firepower, veteran, really good player. I mean, I kind of want to relate it a little bit to Julio Jones, but also Julio Jones has not been playing at the same level as D-Hop has been over the last couple of years. But I remember when they were both fire plugs in the league at one point. So, but I mean, there's definitely going to be a team that, even if it's not somebody that desperately needs one, that might make a pretty fair trade for Hop. I mean, I feel like even from a Steelers perspective, for the Bears, I know the Bears, we got a second overall pick. Well, it's technically a late first round because Miami doesn't have a draft pick, but they gave us a second round pick for Chase Claypool, and I didn't think Chase Claypool was that good of a receiver. Yeah. So, and I think DeAndre Hopkins way past, Chase Claypool. So if you can get a second round pick for Chase Claypool, and with the demand of wide receivers there, honestly, Arizona might be in good shape. You just got to see, I mean, if you're willing to keep D-Hop or if you're willing to potentially make a different trade and make a move and then maybe get a couple picks out of it or some players or something. So it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting.
Yeah. You have to be careful with comps like that because you have to look at multiple comps because there's always an outlier. Whether it's bad or good, that they, I think most people would agree they overpaid for Chase Claypool.
Yeah.
And then there was a trade for Mohamed Sanu. That was a second round pick a few years back. That was an overpay. But then you see, what's his name? He was with the Raiders and then the played at college at Bama. My brain's not working. Then he went to the Cowboys, and now he's with the Browns. And he was traded for like Amari Cooper was traded for what, like a day 3 pick, and there were other things involved, like the contract and everything. So you have to look at what this is. Listen, I see a lot of fans, kind of sometimes being a little. They're looking for the comp that suits what they want. It's like, they look. So if they find the most or least valuable comp, and you have to. That's why when I try to look at these things, I look at multiple comps, and this is, I'm a sociologist, so I look at data for a living. Sometimes I'm understanding how to look at outliers and kind of pushing those out of the way and looking at larger trends. So with comps, you gotta take a little bit broader picture because you can always find that one case that supports your narrative. Yeah,
the confirmation bias in the league is huge.
Especially fans are the worst. We're the worst.
Yeah,
But
and I count myself as a fan, so
that's what makes it fun, though, too. So,
yeah. I always say fans gonna fan. That's
especially when you're right.
Yeah.
Something I just thought about was, so I'd imagine DeAndre Hopkins is at a point in his career where he's looking for that Super Bowl ring.
Mm-hmm.
He's likely a Hall of Famer, maybe not a first balloter, but I think he's built a good enough resume to where he's going to be a Hall of Famer eventually. Super Bowl ring really puts him over the top. Does Jonathan Gannon coming in just fresh off of a Super Bowl, leading part of the team as the defensive coordinator, maybe he stays and he's like, hey, let's see what this guy's got. Do you think there's anything to that at all? I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be, I don't think it's ever as simple as, he was just in the Super Bowl, so I believe he can get us there.
Right.
But that's a part of it. He was part of a Super Bowl, a team that made it to the Super Bowl, so he's been part of a culture and organization that did that. I think, I have to imagine at some point, unless it's a foregone conclusion they're going to trade him, I think he's going to meet with Gannon, and I think that meeting is the most important thing, because you meet with someone and you get a feeling, right? Whether that's rational or not, right? You get a feeling. Do I trust that this person is going to take us to the promised land? And my hope is that he would feel that way, and that would be the reality. So, I think that will get his attention. Okay. If I could see a scenario where Hopkins was like, no, I think I want to go. I want to be traded. And then they hire this guy and it's like, well, he was just in the Super Bowl. I think I want to meet him and have a conversation with him. Right. I could see a scenario where that shifts his opinion. I'm not saying that it will or won't. And maybe he's already decided he wanted to, sign on to continue with the Cardinals. So, it could be a small factor, but I think the bigger factor is going to be the impression he has of the GM and the coach after meeting them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know if do you have any more you want to say? Hype up your YouTube. I'm going to put the link in the description for the video.
Well, listen, I could talk football all day, so
I could too. We're at 30. We're at 33 though. So
okay, let me give you one last tidbit, and then I'll give you the plugs. One thing I'm hopeful about with the offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, the guy they're bringing in, because they didn't really bring this up. He was the quarterbacks coach with the Browns, was previously the tight ends coach. And I look at he did good work with Jacoby Brissett this last year, but also look at what Cleveland did. Kind of, people don't talk about this enough. What they did, making an offense that made Baker Mayfield efficient in that 1 year, that was his best year. A lot of bootlegs to kind of get him out so he could see half the field, and a lot of heavy running game. And I just look at that and okay, look at what Kyler Murray's limitations are. Okay, sometimes seeing the middle of the field with the linemen in front of him is an issue, right? And then what happens is when pressure comes, he doesn't stand tall in the pocket and throw the ball. He hits the eject button. Well, if you're doing bootlegs that are rolling him out, that kind of helps address both of those problems. He's already out of the pocket where he's dangerous, and he's not having to sit there and wait and then hit the eject button. And he can see the field better. Those linemen are all right in front of him. And it's I just think if they were able to build an offense that worked for Baker Mayfield, and this coach was steeped in that system and brings that kind of approach here, I think they're going to do some things that are going to really work for Kyler Murray that I'm excited about. So that's my last little football nugget. But the Cardinal Rule on YouTube. Find me the Cardinal Rule. I launched this a couple years ago, just before the draft 2 years ago. I do Arizona Cardinals content. I do live streams, podcast style like this. I do shorter analysis videos. I just did one where I looked at the draft history of where Monty Ossenfort kind of cut his teeth to try to project how he's going to approach the draft for the Cardinals. So a lot of different stuff for Cardinals fans, or if you're just a general NFL fan who likes good content for any team, check it out.
And you're a big data guy. You love data. You mentioned you're a sociologist, so you've got it all kind of.
I got a little quantitative training in the background.
There we go. Yeah. Well, I'll do my plug then for this show. The Instagram is @NoButts_show. The Twitter, which is my Twitter, is Josh_Butts_2001. You can email us at bullmoosepodcast2@gmail.com. Someone emailed us and they said, sometimes you're really exciting and then sometimes Chus sounds really monotone. So
really? Did that?
I need to
actually email that?
Yeah, we need to balance out our tone and tempers, I guess.
Oh, I guess I must be exhausted on certain days, but I mean, I guess that's how it is. I guess I apologize.
Like that.
Yeah,
we're both college students. These professors are wearing us down.
Yeah,
so the YouTube, if you're watching the video, you're already there, but it's No Buts About It. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go subscribe to the Cardinal Rule, Joe's channel, and subscribe to our channel as well, please. So that's going to be all for today. I hope you all enjoyed the show, and go do something nice for someone.